You aren't woman enough to keep your man satisfied. That's why he needs a real woman like me," Ashley sneered across the coffee shop table, her acrylic nails tapping against my husband's credit card as she paid for her latte. I sat silently, letting her spend 2 hours detailing my failures as a wife while she flaunted the designer bag Brian had bought her with what he thought was our joint savings. 3 months later she discovered that not only was our house solely in my name, but the successful businessman she'd stolen was actually $800,000 in debt. Debt I wouldn't be sharing thanks to the financial separation I'd quietly orchestrated 2 years before I caught them in our bed. The morning I found them started like any other Tuesday. I'd taken a half day from the insurance firm where I worked as an actuary to surprise Brian for our 15th anniversary. 15 years of marriage, 2 kids in college, and what I thought was a solid middle-class life in our suburban Chicago home. The cliché of finding them in our bed would have been funnier if it hadn't been so pathetic. Brian, attempting to cover himself with our wedding quilt. Ashley, his 28-year-old assistant from the car dealership, scrambling for her clothes while screaming about this not being what it looked like. "I can explain," Brian had said, the words every cheating spouse learns from the same script. I didn't scream. Didn't cry. Didn't throw things like the wronged wives in movies. I simply took out my phone, snapped a few photos for my records, and left. The silence seemed to disturb them more than any tantrum would have. "Margaret, wait." Brian had called, struggling into his pants. "Let's talk about this like adults." I'd kept walking. There would be time for talking later, with lawyers present. That was 3 weeks before Ashley requested to meet me at Starbucks, woman to woman. I'd agreed out of morbid curiosity and the professional habit of gathering information before making decisions. She dressed for the occasion, designer everything, fresh blowout, makeup that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. The ring on her finger was particularly interesting. Not an engagement ring, but clearly expensive, clearly from Brian. "Margaret," she'd started, pronouncing my name like it tasted bad. "I think we should clear the air." "By all means." She'd launched into a speech that felt rehearsed. How she hadn't meant for it to happen. How Brian had been so lonely, so neglected, so desperate for understanding. How I'd let myself go, focused too much on work, stopped being the woman he'd married. "When's the last time you wore lingerie for him?" she'd asked, as if that was the metric for a successful marriage. "When did you last cook his favorite meal? Plan a romantic evening?" I'd sipped my tea, letting her words wash over me like white noise. She needed this performance more than I needed to respond. "He says you treat him like a roommate, not a husband. That you care more about your spreadsheets than spreading your," she'd paused, smirking at her own cleverness, affection. "Interesting perspective," I'd said mildly. "Look at you," she'd continued, emboldened by my calm. "That suit is from what, Target? Your hair hasn't seen a salon in months. You drive a Toyota. No wonder he needed someone who makes him feel like a success." She'd pulled out Brian's credit card then, the platinum one, waving it like a flag. "He wants me to have the best. Says I deserve everything you never appreciated." "I'm sure he does. You're not even fighting for him. What kind of woman just gives up?" "The kind who knows when to cut her losses," I'd said, finishing my tea. She'd talked for another hour, alternating between insulting my appearance, my career, my parenting, and my failure to recognize what a prize Brian was. I'd nodded occasionally, making mental notes that had nothing to do with her critique and everything to do with the financial crimes she was unknowingly confessing. "He's already looking at condos for us," she'd finished triumphantly. "Somewhere fresh, without all your boring furniture and sad energy. How nice for you both." "That's it? That's all you have to say?" I'd stood, leaving a $5 tip for the barista who'd had to witness this spectacle. "Thank you for the information, Ashley. It's been very educational." "You're pathetic," she'd called after me. No wonder he upgraded. I'd smiled all the way to my car, then drove straight to my lawyer's office. What Ashley didn't know, what Brian had apparently forgotten in his midlife crisis, was that I'd restructured our finances 2 years earlier when I'd first noticed discrepancies. Small things initially, cash withdrawals that didn't match receipts, business expenses that seemed inflated, a growing reluctance to discuss financial planning. My actuarial brain doesn't do well with uncertainty. So I'd investigated. The gambling debts came first. Online poker, sports betting, then graduating to casino weekends disguised as business trips. Then came the bad investments, cryptocurrency schemes, day trading losses, a failed attempt to flip houses with borrowed money. Brian had hidden it well, maintaining the facade of the successful car dealership manager while bleeding money faster than he could earn it. By the time I'd uncovered the full extent, he was nearly $500,000 in debt. I'd considered confronting him, demanding counseling, fighting to save our marriage. But then I'd found the dating app on his phone, the messages to women promising them the world with money he didn't have. So instead, I'd gotten strategic. First, the house. Our mortgage was nearly paid off, but it had always been in both our names. I'd suggested refinancing to get a better rate, handling all the paperwork myself. Brian, distracted by his double life, had signed where I'd pointed. The new mortgage was in my name only, a detail in the fine print he'd never bothered to read. Next, I'd separated our finances under the guise of better budgeting. Different accounts for different purposes, I'd explained. Brian kept his checking account and credit cards, I managed everything else. He'd been relieved to hand over the responsibility, free to spend without seeing the consequences. I'd paid down debts strategically, keeping the ones in both our names current while letting his personal obligations slide. I'd moved our savings into accounts only I could access, leaving just enough in the joint account to avoid suspicion. Then I'd waited, gathering evidence like the good actuary I was, calculating the exact moment when leaving would cause maximum financial protection for me and our children. Ashley had simply accelerated the timeline. "This is remarkable," my lawyer, Patricia Chen, said as she reviewed my documentation. "You've essentially performed a legal financial separation while still married." "I prefer to think of it as risk management," I'd replied. "And the house is entirely in your name? No claims from him?" He signed a quitclaim deed during the refinance. Notarized and filed with the county. Patricia had actually laughed. "What about his debts?" "The gambling debts are in his name only. The failed investments were through his personal LLC. The credit cards he's been using to fund his lifestyle choices? Also solely his responsibility." "And Ashley?" "Is about to discover that the successful businessman she's been dating is actually negative net worth. The car he drives belongs to the dealership. The condo he's supposedly buying? He can't qualify for a mortgage. Even that platinum card she was waving around is maxed out. I checked before canceling myself as an authorized user. The divorce papers were served 2 weeks later." Brian had shown up at the house, my house, raging about fairness and betrayal. "You can't just take everything." "I'm not taking anything. I'm keeping what's mine and leaving you with what's yours. Which happens to be debt." "What about 15 years of marriage? Doesn't that count for something?" "It counted for 14 years and 6 months. The last 6 months, you were interviewing my replacement." "Ashley understands me." "Ashley understands your credit limit. Wait until she sees your credit score." He'd tried everything, anger, bargaining, even tears. But math doesn't care about emotions, and the numbers were clear. The house was mine. The savings were mine. The modest retirement fund I'd built was mine. His debts, his mistakes, his 28-year-old girlfriend who expected a lifestyle he'd been financing with fraud, all his. "The kids will hate you for this," he'd tried as a last resort. "The kids are adults who've watched their father gamble away their college funds. I'm the one who took out personal loans to keep them in school. Try again." The legal process was surprisingly quick when one party has documentation and the other has nothing but bluster. Brian fought for about a month before his lawyer explained the futility. Illinois is an equitable distribution state, but equitable doesn't mean equal when one spouse has been dissipating marital assets on gambling and girlfriends. The best part came during the asset disclosure phase. Ashley had been accompanying Brian to meetings, sitting in the parking lot in the car she thought he owned. Patricia made sure to schedule the meeting where we revealed his true financial status for a time when she'd be waiting. "Let me summarize," Patricia had said, sliding the financial statement across the table. "Mr. Morrison owes approximately $800,000 across various creditors. His only assets are personal belongings and a 401k worth $12,000 that's already been borrowed against. Ms. Morrison has agreed to take no spousal support in exchange for the house and keeping her separate assets." Brian's lawyer had nodded grimly. "That's generous, considering. My client is motivated to move forward, not punish," Patricia said smoothly. "Though we reserve the right to pursue fraud charges if Mr. Morrison contests this arrangement." I'd watched Brian's face as he absorbed the reality. No house to mortgage for a fresh start. No savings to tap. No credit to extend. Just debt and a girlfriend who expected diamonds. No. How could you do this to me? He'd whispered. I didn't do anything to you. You did it to yourself. I just declined to go down with the ship. Ashley lasted exactly 2 weeks after the financial disclosure. Brian came by the house to collect his things, alone and deflated. She called me a fraud, he said, standing in what used to be our doorway. Said I'd lied about everything. You did lie about everything. I was going to fix it. The investments would have paid off eventually. That's what all gamblers say. He'd looked around the house, at the furniture he'd called boring, the life he deemed insufficient. I threw away everything for nothing. Yes, you did. But that's your pattern, isn't it? Always chasing the bigger score, the better deal, the upgraded model. How's that working out? Margaret, I'm sorry. For everything. Could we maybe? No. You didn't even let me finish. I don't need to. The answer to any question starting with could we is no. We couldn't, we can't, we won't. He'd left with his boxes of belongings, driving off in a borrowed car to stay with a friend. The last I heard, he was working at a different dealership, living in a studio apartment, and dating someone new who didn't know about his financial history yet. I kept the house, as promised. Redecorated it exactly how I'd always wanted, all those boring choices he'd vetoed over the years. Painted the walls colors that made me happy. Bought furniture that was comfortable rather than impressive. Turned his man cave into a home office where I studied for additional certifications. The kids come home to a peaceful space now. They bring friends and partners without the tension that used to permeate every gathering. We have game nights and dinners where no one is checking their phone for gambling scores or texting their mistress. 6 months after the divorce, I ran into Ashley at the grocery store. She was buying generic brands and looked significantly less polished than during our coffee shop encounter. She saw me and tried to duck down another aisle, but I was faster. Ashley, I called pleasantly. How are you? She turned, trapped between the soup cans and her own choices. Fine. I'm glad. Brian treating you well? We're not, that's over. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. What happened to the condo? The fresh start? Her laugh was bitter. There was no condo. No money. No success. Just debt and lies. That must have been disappointing. You knew. During coffee that day, you knew everything and let me sit there bragging about stealing a broke man. You didn't steal him. I gifted him. Like donating a broken appliance to Goodwill, someone else's problem to fix or throw away. You're cruel. No, I'm practical. You thought you were upgrading to a successful man who'd shower you with gifts. Instead, you got a gambling addict who can't qualify for a Kohl's charge card. That's not cruel, that's karma. She'd walked away without another word, leaving her generic soup behind. I finished my shopping, loaded my reliable Toyota with groceries for a dinner party I was hosting that weekend. My house, paid for, peaceful, and entirely mine, waited for me. Sometimes I think about that coffee shop meeting, how Ashley had mocked my Target suits and suburban life. She'd been right about one thing, I wasn't woman enough to keep Brian. I was too much woman to settle for him. The difference between us was simple, she saw my practical clothes and modest car as signs of failure. I saw them as signs of financial intelligence. She thought Brian's platinum card meant success. I knew it meant desperation. She kept the man. I kept the house. Looking back, we both got exactly what we deserved.